second of two chapters on corporations, this being the retained earnings chapter, and today we are going to talk all about stock dividends again. I'd like for you to know what stock dividends are and what they accomplish. This discussion kind of starts with the illustration I attempted at the end of the Monday lecture. The graphics I showed to contrast the cash dividend with the stock dividend. I'm hoping you saw that, and I'm hoping if I describe it briefly, you'll remember it, and perhaps even review it. A cash dividend actually distributes assets of the corporation to the shareholder. The assets of the corporation are reduced, so is stockholders' equity. A stock dividend simply rearranges the stockholders' equity accounts. No assets of the business leave the business. Paid in becomes larger, retained becomes smaller. It was the words I said in Monday's lecture, that illustration, and this exercise that I consider to be my attempt at the complete package to try to get across to you the impact of stock dividends. Would you turn with me to exercise 14.5? It's at the bottom of page 655. That's what we're going to use as our inspiration for what we're going to do today. We're going to modify it somewhat to help you understand better. 14.5 at the bottom of 655 says, on October 1st, our corporation's stockholders' equity is as follows: common stock, paid in excess, retained earnings, total stockholders' equity. How much? If you see the number, say so. $580,000 of stockholders' equity. On October 1st, we declared and distributed a 10% stock dividend when the market value of the stock was $15 a share. Instructions: compute the par value per share before the stock dividend and after the dividend. May I say the 10th edition says this differently than the previous editions of the book. They have taken the thunder out of this exercise. I'll read once more. Compute the par value before the dividend. Would you look back up at the indented information where it says common stock $5 par? Hello? Don't you hope the test questions are that easy? Yeah. Give you the answer in the question? They used to say in this exercise, compute equity per share. And I'm going to do the throwback. We're going to work this exercise the way it was intended to be worked all along. There's a handout to help you follow along better coming down your row. I hope you pass them down quickly and stay tuned with me. Even when it was written the way it should be written, I got it. Even when it was written the way it should be written, I embellished this exercise to help you see the point. I plan to do that with this one, but I plan to work it where it's got some meat to it and not so milquetoast. Does everybody have a handout? So I'd like you to use this information and help me determine something called equity per share. Now this is one in a long series of expressions, terms that we've used that we think sometimes are just gobbledygook, that somebody just made this up and it's torture because it makes no sense. And the truth is that most accounting expressions are fairly descriptive, and they tell you what they're talking about if you'll just listen. Like cost of goods sold. That's not nonsense. That's something that really describes what we're trying to find. Like retained earnings. What's the synonym for this word? Kept. Say it. Kept. And for this word? Profits. Kept profits. Retained earnings. If you think about it, it makes some sense. So does equity per share. Miles per gallon. Equity per share. Instead of thinking of it as this big nonsense term, let's think of it as three words and see what they mean and why they were combined to convey this idea. Explain equity to me. In an accounting sense, what does equity mean? I need a volunteer quickly. Logan? Yeah. Actually, a teeny bit broader than that. Equity, it means claims on assets. And there are two types. It could be creditors' claims. We call those liabilities. It could be owner's claims. We call that owner's equity, or these last 2 weeks we've been calling it Stockholders' equity. Please don't pass this course and leave this material behind and not know what equity is. It's this basic thing that we just simply must know. In our context, owner's claim on assets is what we're driving at. Claim on assets. Of the mathematical operations, add, subtract, multiply, divide, which would be per. What would you do to get per? Divide. So, what if instead of being written in letters like this, horizontally, where we would read it, how about we write it like this? Does that make any sense? Doesn't that tell you how to do it? Take total stockholders' equity, divide by the number of shares. Oops, here we run into shares again. How many occasions have we talked about, is it authorized, is it issued, or is it outstanding? Which one of them would be the most appropriate to divide equity by to get equity per share? Which one of them is the best description for shares with rights? Say something. What's the difference in issued and outstanding? Treasury stock. So if you just said issued, are you going to let the treasury stock vote? Does treasury stock get a cash dividend?
No.
Which of these is the best description for shares with rights? Outstanding shares have rights. So, if we took total equity and divided by the number of shares outstanding, that'd be equity per share. Total equity divided by the shares outstanding. Do you know total equity in this problem? Say the number. 580,000. Do you know the number of shares issued and outstanding? And if you don't, can we find it? I think I shared with you a skill last time in class that would give us that information if it wasn't said. Oh, and how do we find the number of shares if we want to? If they're not given.
In the common stock account, you have 400,000. And you keep up with stock at par, and it's $5 par, so 400,000 divided by 5.
If we divide 400,000 by 5, we would get authorized, issued, or outstanding.
Issued.
That's issued. That's how they got in that account, was because they were issued. But I want to know outstanding.
Well, you would subtract treasury stock, but there is no treasury stock.
Treasury stock wasn't mentioned, therefore we must conclude it doesn't exist in this problem. We're drawing the balance of common stock, 400,000 by par, $5, getting number of shares issued to be 80,000. Subtract 0 treasury shares and get 80,000 outstanding. If you're with me right this minute, say yes.
Yes.
580,000, the balance of the total equity divided by the number of shares outstanding is equity per share as we begin this situation of, y'all need to borrow calculators? 580,000 divided by 80,000 is $7.25 is equity per share. It's a nice thing to know. It's not going to keep the sun from coming up tomorrow, but it's a nice thing to know. It's a nice way to compare companies, perhaps. If you're thinking about buying 3 or 4 different kinds of stock, maybe this is one way you compare them. It's just a little teeny thing. It's the total amount of claim on assets for one share of stock. And it ought to have some influence on the price at which the stock sells in the marketplace, but it only has a tiny or no effect on that because it's all these other conditions that affect that. The stability of the economy at whole, whether the Fed raises or lowers the interest rate, the latest unemployment figures, whether there's an assassination attempt on the Post, whether the hurricane hits New York and New Jersey. You're with me here? There are all sorts of extraneous events that cause market price of stock to go up and down. This is just one little thing that is a measurement and a comparative tool in business, equity per share. Now, that's a basis. That's a baseline thing that we're going to compare with in a few minutes. The heart of this problem is about the stock dividend and practicing again and things that you should already know and could be participate with me at a greater level on Friday than you did on Monday. And make some calculations and get a half step ahead and build your confidence. The problems say, let's make entries to record declaring and distributing a stock dividend. Well, it's similar to a discussion that we already had in the last few minutes. We need to base this on the number of shares outstanding, and I wish I'd had this on the screen a second ago, but I did it in the air, and here's your opportunity to see it. We took the balance of common stock and divided it by par in the air a second ago, and I kind of liked it actually because you had to pay attention and listen. And when we did, we determined there were how many shares issued? 80,000 shares were issued. Yes? And it is on that that we're now basing our calculation for the stock dividend. We're going to start with those old shares outstanding and multiply them by the percent dividend the board of directors declared. Refresh my memory. How much? 10%. If we take these 8,000 old shares and multiply by 10%, we determine the number of new shares we're going to issue. How many? 8,000 new shares are going to be issued. Every time I do a stock dividend, I'll lay it out this way. There's probably other ways you could do it. It's just a way that I'm trying to be thorough and make less mistakes or catch my mistakes if I make them. I need to know three things from that. I need to know market, I need to know par, and I need to know the excess. What's market in this problem? 15 a share? What's market? Par. Say it a whole bunch of times. Par's 5. The difference is there's a $10 excess. So help me with the math. You might could do this without a calculator. Let's do 8,000 times 10. I bet you can do that one in your head. 8,000 times 10 is 80,000. If that's true, then half of that must be 40,000. Thank you very much. Sum these if you don't have a calculator to get that number. Or multiply it out and know you got it right. If you're with me right this minute, say yes.
Yes.
I can't pass up this opportunity to drive home the point once again that a stock dividend is driven by the market conditions at the time the board of directors takes action. It is market that we really want to know. It is 120,000 that is being shifted from retained to paid in the journal entry we're about to make. If you want to know impact of stock dividend, it's market. It increases paid in and decreases retained by the amount of the by the amount of the market on the day the board of directors took action. Let's translate these numbers into the journal entry we're attempting to make. There they are. I need 3 volunteers to identify with an account name those 3 amounts. You going first, Courtney?
Yeah, I know the second one.
Really?
Yeah.
That's the hardest one.
Yeah. The second one.
I can do them in any order.
Oh, okay. Well,
The 40,000 you're trying to tell me
yeah.
is
Common stock dividends distributed.
stock dividends distributable. It's okay to say common. I didn't have enough room and I tried to leave the least important word out.
Right.
Stock dividends distributable. What an unusual account name. There are 26 chapters in this book. I contend that that's the most unusual name for an account. Matthew, you want to name one?
Sure.
What?
120,000 debit is stock dividend.
This is stock dividends. I need a third volunteer. Let's go faster. Owen?
Computing capital in excess of par.
I don't know about you yet, but I'm hoping that by Friday, if you see that, you make some connection with, how did I use that last week? Oh yeah, last week in the last chapter I was issuing stock. That's when this one came about. I wonder if this has anything to do with issuing stock ultimately. We're setting it up right now. We're trying to get there gradually. It is market driven. These are increasing paid in accounts. This is decreasing retained. That's the second time I've said it today. Let's talk about these accounts. Matthew, what kind of an account is stock dividends?
I don't know.
Matthew, you volunteered. Is it an asset, liability, capital, revenue, expense? Matthew's begging for a lifeline. Somebody but Owen. Nate?
Capital.
It's capital. What's capital's normal balance?
Credit.
What's stock dividends normal balance?
Debit.
Ooh, explain yourself out of that one.
Contra capital.
Contra capital. Capital's got two parts. Is this contra paid in or contra retained?
Contra retained.
Or contra the whole thing?
I believe it's contra retained.
You are correct.
Reducing retained.
Thank you. I gave that away just a second ago. Thank you, Nate, for knowing that. It's contra retained. Like cash dividends. Like John Doe drawing. And therefore, closed or not closed, Nate,
Close.
in which step?
Fourth step.
Fourth step. Sam, my one regret this week is that I didn't borrow your note-taking guide to use the 9:50 hour. Nobody at 9:50 had it. Y'all remember what happened in class last time about now? When we were talking about the fourth step in closing entries? It's in your note-taking guide first semester, when you were first introduced to the concept of 4 steps in closing entries. I'm trying to connect this to something you already know. I'm trying to make it apparent. Stock dividends is contra retained earnings. What kind of an account is stock dividends distributable, Courtney?
And it is well a capital account.
It is capital.
It is well a capital.
It is. The best wrong answer, the most often given wrong answer to this is liability. I'm going to say it again, hoping. Does it help you when I tell you potential wrong answers? Does it put you on your guard and make you more careful? That's the whole idea here. Your tendency might be to choose liability. And this and liabilities have in common that they're obligations. Most liabilities can be paid with cash. This obligation we have can't be fulfilled with the payment of cash. Can only be fulfilled with the shares of stock we've committed to. This is not a liability. If it had been a liability, we would have called it stock dividends payable. The sheer fact that it's not called stock dividends payable ought to raise your antenna and say, look out. You might classify that wrong. Are you with me or not?
Yes.
It's not a liability. It is an obligation. Logan.
That's what I'm confused about, because if we have to pay the stock dividend to the owners, how would it not be considered
I'm glad you asked.
a liability?
My first thing that I said to you when I tried to begin talking about stock dividends in the video, we talked about cash dividends. Even last time in class we did cash dividends, and I reviewed. What's the difference? How do you know? How can you identify from reading a problem that it's a cash dividend or it's a stock dividend? And you think I'm talking down to you and treating you like a first grader, and I'm not. I know of no other way to say it any more simple than that. A cash dividend pays out cash. A stock dividend gives out shares of stock. What you just said to me was faulty. You said, if you're going to pay this stock dividend, how can it not be a liability? You're not going to pay this stock dividend. It does not require the payment of cash. It is stock we're giving out, not cash. Are you with me right now?
Yeah, but couldn't the concept be translated into the same?
No.
No.
Stock and cash are two different things. That's like saying,
Well, we have to give the stock out.
we do.
We have an obligation.
That's what I'm trying to say. That's the obligation we have. but it's not to give out cash. It's to give out stock. That's the point I'm trying to make. Are you with me, Logan?
Yeah.
Good. Thank you. You helped everybody. It's an obligation, Courtney. It's not a liability. You said it's capital, and I agree. Its balance is credit. Is it contra capital?
Yes, because I just think it agrees with stock dividends, so.
I don't know what agrees with stock dividends. Does that mean?
No, it just ties in with stock dividends.
It does,
Yeah,
but it takes all of it to tie
Yeah.
in. But this is a debit and that's a credit. Is this contra?
Yes.
Is this contra?
No.
No. That's the point I'm trying to make.
Okay.
Its normal balance is credit. And it's capital, you said correctly.
Yeah.
So is it contra?
No.
Ooh, we're eliminating bad answers. It's not a liability and it's not contra. How y'all doing? It is capital. Paid in or retained?
Retained.
Paid in or retained, Nate? Paid in or retained? Everybody? It's paid in. This reduces retained. This increases paid in. Can you think of more adjectives we could put in front of paid in? It's capital. It's paid in capital. It's paid in capital.
Temporary.
Courtney, you want to fill this one in? Brooke, was that you?
Temporary.
It's temporary paid in capital, kind of like a tadpole, kind of like a caterpillar. Yes or no?
Yes.
Am I reminding you of anything?
Yes.
It's a temporary paid in stockholders equity account. I don't know if I've done this in this class or not, but maybe this will help. Our safe is big, like a bank. And I'm walking in the safe. And I see boxes and boxes of unissued shares of stock. And I'm counting out 80,000? No, 8,000. Yes, Owen? I'm counting out 8,000 shares, literally, and putting them in a separate pile in the vault with a big old note on it. Don't touch these. Keep your hands off. These are the shares of stock we're going to issue in a few days. They're waiting to be issued. They are temporary paid-in stockholders' equity. They can't vote. They don't share in earnings. They don't have any rights. They're just in another pile, waiting. Are you with me or not? And when enough time has passed that we've established ownership, we're ready to mail those shares. We're going to put them in envelopes and mail them to the shareholders that already own stock. This is a temporary paid-in stockholders' equity account. This happens between the date of declaration and the date of record. It's just this little temporary period of time. And if you prepare a balance sheet in that temporary period of time, you list stock dividends distributable right after common stock. Common stock issued. Stock dividends distributable, waiting to be issued. Are you with me or not? Say yes or no.
Yes.
Owen?
Why do we do this? Because, I mean, every person, by one of the rules back with dividends, is entitled to a certain percentage of the company. And when you do this, they have to maintain that percentage of the company.
And they will.
And they will, so they don't really gain anymore.
Oh, I thought you meant why do we do this?
Oh,
You mean,
Yeah.
okay, I pushed somebody to the big why.
Yeah.
That's what I was trying to do today. Okay? I got to work the rest of this exercise.
Okay.
But that's the point I'm trying to make. I'm trying to get somebody to wonder why. Here we go. Are you square on this journal entry?
Yes.
That's the hardest thing we're doing this week. That doesn't mean you can't accomplish it. It deserves your attention. You ought to practice it enough. You ought to understand what you're doing. Don't just rote. Memorize it. Just spill it out because I say so. Try to get an idea of what's happening. Now, it says in the directions, and distribute the stock. I need a new volunteer. I need them fast. David,
Stock dividend distributable.
debit or credit?
Debit,
Good.
40,000.
Good. How much?
40,000.
Real good. Go.
And common stock credit for 40,000.
You want to hear what happened yesterday, class? The volunteers said credit cash. Why'd you chuckle, Logan?
We're not paying.
Are y'all with me right this minute or not? We're issuing stock. Now, on the spectrum of this week's entries, I just went on record as saying recording a stock dividend is the hardest entry this week. The easiest entry this week is paying the cash dividend. Debit, dividends, payable, credit, cash. That's the easiest entry this week. Agreed?
Yeah.
Yes? Okay. Right next to that in ease should be this one. And you're not thinking with me right now. If you don't see the ease of this entry, you don't fully understand what's going on. If you've made this entry correctly, then it is par that is this entry. When you don't make this entry for par, you break my heart. That ought to be so obvious. And this temporary paid-in stockholders' equity account has served its purpose, and we're issuing the shares. Do you remember when we went in the safe and counted out 8,000 and put them in a pile? Now they're in envelopes, and they've got mailing labels on them, and we're taking them to the post office. They're in the mail. They're issued. If we call a board of directors meeting now, they can vote. If we pay a cash dividend now, they get one. If we go out of business right now, those shares are used in determining who gets what. Are you with me? Please say yes. Do you have a question? Now, I didn't say anything new up until this point that I didn't say on Wednesday. Let's do some new stuff. Let's try to understand this better. Let's see the impact of this. So, let's post. We just made some journal entries. Let's update the accounts. Here's what was in the book. You want to glance there and prove it to yourself? These are the numbers right out of the book. When I read the problem to you at the beginning, I said this, and this right out of the book. You've seen this 580,000 before, haven't you? So I need you in the next minute or two to quickly find one of these numbers. Tell me which one of these it affects. Tell me whether it increases or decreases. And tell me what the new balance is. Let's go faster. Top to bottom. Somebody see anything that changed common stock up there? Owen?
40,000.
This 40,000 needs to be posted to that account as an increase or a decrease. It increases it to what new balance?
440,000.
Find something up here, class, please, and tell me that it changed paid in capital. Where's my new volunteer, Matthew?
80,000.
80,000, the one right there,
Yes.
is posted to this paid in capital as an increase or a decrease?
Increase.
I didn't hear you, sorry.
Increase.
It increased it to what new balance, Matthew?
105,000.
105,000. Are y'all with me or not? You're just taking notes. You're not thinking like you should be. Anything else that happened here that affects this? And if there is nothing else, say there is nothing else so we can move on quickly. Mumblers, mumblers, mumblers. Brooke?
Stock dividends.
I don't see stock dividends there anywhere.
Cash and stock dividends affect retained earnings.
How?
They make it go down.
Yes. Way to go, Brooke. Way to go, Brooke. Did you see me try to trick you, class?
Yeah.
Is there anything here that affects retained earnings? Doesn't appear to be. No, retained earnings is not mentioned there. Is there something there that affects retained earnings? That debit to stock dividends gets closed to retained earnings in the fourth step of closing entries, Nate. Yes?
Yeah.
You told us that today. And increases this account or decreases it, Brooke?
Decreases.
To what new number, Brooke?
35,000.
I need 100% of you to add this and tell me what you got. Hurry up, I don't have all day. Logan? No, that's this total. I want to know this total, Logan. Have you added it? What'd you get? Say it. What? We did all this and it's the same? What does a stock dividend do? For the third time today, a stock dividend increases paid in and decreases retained by what? By the market price of the stock the day the board of directors declared it. I repeat, the whole package is the word definition of a stock dividend from Monday's lecture that says no assets are distributed to the shareholders and that it's a shift from retained to paid in. The graphic and the short story you saw in Monday's lecture contrasting a cash dividend and a stock dividend, where a stock dividend doesn't give assets of the corporation but rearranges the account balances. And a cash dividend really gives assets of the corporation. And this is supposed to be the icing on the cake that begins to help it make sense. Courtney, your hand was up.
I don't know if he just asked this, but like, yeah, why do you do that? when you
I've
can
pushed
just-
somebody else to the why
You
button.
can just,
Let me make one more point, okay? At the beginning of the exercise, you were asked to find equity per share before the dividend. Now I'm asking you to find equity per share after the dividend. Remember, we divided total stockholders' equity, which you just determined to be how much? I don't know where my same button is. Say a number. 580,000 was the balance of stockholders' equity now. And how many shares are there? 80,000? Ah, 8,000 new ones. Right, Logan? Now there are 88,000 shares. Would you do the math quickly? I don't have all day. 6.5909. To make the point I'm trying to make, we're going to have to use all the decimals. So I've got the same amount of equity spread over more shares. It would make sense that it would go down. That number before the dividend was, anybody remember? $7.25 claim on assets per share. Now it's that's about $6.60, about. You see the number. And here's my favorite part. The problem says, assumption, down at the bottom, Anna owned 100 shares before the dividend. Compute the equity of her holdings before the dividend and after the dividend. This is pretty simple stuff, if you'll go with me. Equity per share of her holdings. How many shares does she have, say it?
100.
Anna has 100 shares before the dividend. And equity per share was, you told me $7.25, and without a calculator, you can tell me that result. $725 is Anna's equity in the company. Her shares have that claim on assets. If you're with me right this minute, say yes.
Yes.
And after the dividend, shares, 100? Anna has 100 shares. Who gets the 8,000 shares is the question. The president gets 7,900 and his administrative assistant gets 100. Everybody gets one. Oh, I've got an idea. Put them in a helicopter, fly over the city, dump them out. If you can catch it before it hits the ground, you get to keep it. What does it take to make you smile? Or react at all? My wife calls that an injection of consciousness. I injected nothing in you, apparently. How do we decide who gets these 8,000 shares? Owen?
Divide up among the shareholders.
If you have a lot, you get a lot. If you have a little, you get a little.
Yeah.
In what proportion?
Percent.
You're going to make one up?
10%.
Oh, let me think.
10% with.
Oh, 10%. So if you had 1,000 shares, you'd get. So if you had 100 shares, you'd get. Oh, Anna has 110 shares now. If you're with me, say yes.
Yes.
Nate's question was why 10%? That's the amount of the dividend. That was given in the problem. We've been working with the 10%. That's how we got the 8,000, Nate.
Okay, so you
It was 10% of 80, and that's how we're going to distribute them, we'd say, proportionally. What is 110 times equity per share after the dividend? You got this number a minute ago, and you rounded it. I rounded it to $6.60. You rounded it to 6.59. I wanted to see the whole decimal to make the point I'm trying to make, to eliminate rounding from our decision. Justin, this is...
724.99999.
Would it be all right with you if we call that 725, Justin?
Yeah.
Are you with me, class?
Yeah.
Yesterday in the remaining discussion, the student said, well, we were a penny off, we were a penny short. No, that's not a penny. Look again. That is not a penny. And if you're going to quibble with me and miss this lesson over that little bitty paltry amount, shame on you. So tell me about Anna. Is Anna better off or worse off after this dividend?
Better off.
This is where we move from fact to opinion. I've presented the facts, and my opinion is she's the same off. And this is where people start asking why. And people start proposing, well, what if so-and-so happens in the future? And I contend that what if is going to happen in the future regardless of this event. As a matter of fact, this event is probably going to cause the market price to go down by 10%. And therefore, if it recovers and increases in the future, it probably would have recovered and increased in the future anyway. I think I presented a case for Anna is the same off. And I've also heard the question asked twice, why? If I only had 3 more minutes, I would love to answer the question. Justin, your question is?
Well, you don't have time to answer anyway.
Maybe I do. Maybe yours is easy. Justin, ask it.
I just want to know why they do this. If it's like, why don't they just pay cash?
I have pushed 3 people to the why question. I'll tell you why. Okay, you win. What better time than now to answer the question that I've tried to get to you to ask today, and that's why. The whole purpose of working the exercise that we just did, 14.5, was to try to contrast stock dividends with cash dividends and to get you to this point of wanting to know why. So we just determined that Anna is the same off, or at least that's my opinion that I've expressed to you. So why would a company decide to give a stock dividend? Well, let's go back a bit and say that you're the investor trying to decide which path to go down. Do you put your money in a savings account? And I'm using a piggy bank, but I'm talking about a bank. Do you put your money in a savings account where you could earn interest? Or do you take the approach of buying stock that you could earn dividends from? And if that's the case you choose, then we may have 2 different outcomes here. We may have different conclusions. If you invest your money in the bank, then once a month or once a quarter or whatever, the bank's going to pay you additional interest, and you're going to earn additional cash as you leave your money there to accumulate and earn income, interest income. On the other hand, if you decide to go down the Wall Street route and put your money in stock, then the corporation in whose stock you've invested may pay you a cash dividend, and that might be the same as investing in a savings account. This lesson's not about cash dividends. It's about stock dividends. On the other hand, what if instead of investing in interest in the bank, you invest in stock, but that corporation doesn't pay you a cash dividend? And every month you're thinking, oh, if I'd only put my money in the bank, I'd be getting interest and I could see my money grow. But I'm feeling kind of depressed and neglected that this corporation's not giving me any attention. So the corporation feels your pain and decides, well, maybe we should issue a stock dividend and give them additional shares of stock. And you think, great. Now I'm getting some attention. Now that's what I wanted to see. I wanted to see something for my money that I've invested. But remember the exercise we just worked. You're really in the same position having received these new shares of stock that you were before. We're questioning whether or not we've really gotten anything of value. I contend that they could have just as easily sent you a Christmas card or a thinking of you card to appease for your neglect, your depression. Why give you a stock dividend that represents the same thing you already have? You just needed a little attention. And as a matter of fact, some corporations have taken this route, have kept the earnings of the shareholders, have used those earnings to grow, and been very successful in that. There is a fallacy even with that. Now, that's kind of one end. I'm ending one explanation to why do they do that, this conclusion of thinking of you. But let's consider another. What are the consequences of you getting a stock dividend? You know, sometimes when you get a stock dividend, the shareholder receiving the stock dividend might feel like he might take some of that stock dividend. You want to play Pictionary? What's this? Surely you recognize that as a tree. Might take some of the dividend. Let's say that this is a fruit tree, and this fruit tree is bearing fruit. Or, to be more specific about my analogy, if you didn't get it, that's a dividend. So, if I invest in this stock and they pay me a cash dividend, I reap the fruit. I get the fruit of the tree. And they give me a stock dividend, and I think, oh, well, they didn't pay me cash this time. I'll just turn that into a cash dividend. I'll take some of those shares of stock. Still playing Pictionary with me? So if this is a tree, then maybe these are branches on a tree. And maybe this branch on the tree had fruit hanging from it last year. They gave me a dividend on those shares of stock, that branch of the tree. But I didn't get a stock dividend. I didn't get a cash dividend this year. I got a stock dividend. So what if I decided to go out and convert my stock dividend into a cash dividend? It would sort of be like I was chopping down part of this, cutting a branch off this tree. So in essence, I'm getting rid of this branch and therefore getting rid of this fruit that was on that branch. I won't be able to get those dividends next year because I cut off that branch. I sold those shares of stock, and I won't be getting the cash dividend from that in the future. Well, that's something to consider about, are we better off or worse off with a stock dividend? It could turn into something bad if we decided to get rid of those shares of stock. We need to keep those shares of stock to maintain the same proportion of ownership and therefore get the equivalent dividend that we would expect in the future. There's one other fallacy with this argument of cash dividend versus stock dividend and what the impact would be for the future. These companies that I mentioned a moment ago that have succeeded in not paying out cash dividends, keeping those earnings, growing with them, have also enjoyed their stock price going up in the marketplace. So you're the investor that invested in stock, and you've seen this tree, this stock, grow and flourish, but no cash dividend. Maybe some stock dividends along the way, but no cash dividends or very little in cash dividends. Now, your stock has grown up significantly in price. It's worth a whole lot more today. Then what alternative do you have to reap that benefit from those earnings but to chop down the tree and sell your stock, reap that reward that you've accumulated in watching the value of that stock grow? But that's it. That's a one-time deal. You chop down the tree, it'll no longer grow fruit in form of a dividend or in the form of additional earnings growth, additional stock price growth in the marketplace. So that's the problem we have. The question we came to answer was, why? Why do they give a stock dividend? And what are some of the repercussions of giving that stock dividend? I hope this additional perspective helped you. Have a great day.